Intro chat with Merrill's live, digging deep where techs thrive. From the latest hacks to cool updates, join the ride, don't be late.
Hey folks, welcome to an awesome episode of Intro Chat. I hope it's going to be awesome. I know it's going to be awesome because the topic we're going to speak today is a really fascinating one. And this is something that every company deals with at some point, even though it might not be planned. This is when it comes to mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, like the whole life cycle. I have an expert in this area. He's helped many, many companies and he knows the ins and outs. So I wanted to get him on to share all of his knowledge with us, give you pointers as to, what you should plan for, what are the things you need to look out for, and, what are the best practices when it comes to dealing with all these sorts of things. So Conrad, thanks so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. Absolutely. I could speak for days on migrations, particularly around mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. Been doing it. Well, I've been in IT for, like most people, for years and years and years, but probably been doing tenant-to-tenant migrations or migrations to the cloud for at least 15 years. I actually started out doing IBM, Lotus Notes, and Domino migrations onto Microsoft Exchange on-prem, which then became Microsoft Exchange Online. Did the BPOS D migrations, even dedicated. So I was a contractor at a large accounting firm. And then myself and a couple of colleagues, we set up on our own, and that's kind of what we do. We eat, sleep, and breathe these sort of migrations. And have seen it, from, like saying when it was BPOS right through to Office 365, Microsoft 365, and everything that's now been added into that mix. So yeah, that's what we do.
Perfect. Yeah. Speaking of Lotus Notes, one of my first projects when I moved to Australia here was a Lotus Notes migration, like moving stuff into SharePoint at that time.
Really?
So all of the
that's
content
brave.
from there.
A lot of people shy away from that. The mail stuff was a pretty well-worn path and easy to do, but Lotus Notes applications, they're still out there. Still people don't know what to do with them.
I had to learn the Lotus Notes APIs and write code to script things out.
Did you? That's amazing. I never realized you. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's hardcore. Yes.
It's been it's a fun thing. When you're working in a consultancy back then, I don't know if it's still the same. But you'll just get thrown into, hey, this product, go learn it and figure it out.
Yeah,
and do it in 3 months.
Get that. Yeah.
Yeah,
we actually that's quite a bit of an interesting segue into even some of that stuff, that migrating to the cloud, and tenant stuff. You'll get interesting on-prem applications that have been used, I don't know, CRM tools or storage capabilities, and it's not just file shares, it's in something, and then they want to get that. So, well, we want this thing and we want it to go into SharePoint. Exactly like you said, Lotus Notes. And it's like, well, okay, well, how is this being stored, and what sort of storage systems on it's on, and what sort of permissions are being written to it, and where are those permissions? And I'm really lucky in my organization that I work in. My two fellow founding directors, Tuan Van Beers, and I know Tuan has been mentioned in a couple of your blogs.
Yes.
And Neil Langston, but Tuan is an absolute gun at that kind of stuff. He's really... Nice. They talk about that solution architect being, having breadth and perhaps not the depth. And then you have people that are specialist SMEs. But Tuan is a really rare, unique unicorn, really, in IT, that he has a lot of breadth and depth from networking and applications, and just a general great guy. We're very lucky to have him, actually.
Nice. So he's like the perfect all-rounder.
And some. We were talking about cricket before we started, right?
Exactly. Most of the audience won't understand some of the terms, but
he's kind of the Jarks Callis, really. He's more than an all-rounder. He's a great batter and a great bowler, right?
Yeah. I can remember so many cricket matches where when Jack Harris comes on and like it's when I'm supporting Sri Lanka and we know it's like game over.
He just take the game away
That's
from you.
fine, yeah.
Just he was unreal. He's so underrated, and they talk about we could get into cricket all day, but obviously you
Yeah.
talk about your Ponting and your Langers and the bowlers, but that South African team with Callis in it was they were phenomenal.
Yeah, they were like I was a huge, even though I was a Sri Lankan, I was a huge fan when they came out first.
I mean, well, like you said earlier about Jonty Rhodes, but then there was like Alan Donald and Sean Pollock,
that entire
and
team.
they were phenomenal. Yeah. Well, South Africans will be loving this podcast today, won't they? I'm not going to talk about the rugby though. They can't have the rugby.
Yeah. Cool, awesome. So let's talk about we talking about acquisitions and we'll go through all of the different life cycles, right, that an organizations go through. So one common one is consolidating, right? Acquisitions, when one company buys another company, you end up with two tenants, and now sometimes you end up with two IT teams, different teams managing the tenants, and that's always fun when I'm pulled in and they want me to assess the different tenants and different opinions on both sides. So you end up with that, and then most of the time they sort of consolidate the team, and they then look to consolidate the tenant. But before we get to even consolidating, what do you see happening? Is it keeping the two tenants separately, merging? What are the factors that lead to people sort of merging the tenants together? Microsoft recommendation has always been to merge, but now with the new capabilities like MTO, multi-tenant orgs, and so on, Microsoft is trying to make that easier so that you don't always have to consolidate. What are you seeing, and what's your experience?
There's a lot to unpack there, Meryl.
Yes.
Do you know what? I might leave the MTO part to the end.
Yes.
So yeah, we do a lot of this, right? And it definitely we've got some great case studies, because there's one client in particular I may refer to, but it and not this particular client, but we often will get brought in when there's a merger, and sometimes what we see is when two organizations have kind of equal kind of parity or strength in their position. So they might sometimes they can struggle to agree who's going where.
Yeah.
Well, you should come onto our tenant, and you should come onto our tenant, and you should come into our AD, and you should come into our AD, and neither of them trust each other's environment. They think there's issues in it. So typically what we've seen happen is they'll end up going to a Greenfield AD and maybe even to a Greenfield tenant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And we've seen a couple of large companies do that, where they just, I won't name names, but they just flat out refuse to agree to go into each other's environment. And so they ask us, and we kind of become the arbiter of truth, and we sit alongside and not quite have the final decision, but they'll bounce ideas around off and take our recommendation.
Yeah,
and
I've been in the same place. Ask Microsoft to come in and sort of guide
and be the not the voice of reason, but I don't know, at least the single throat to choke that they can blame rather than someone else, right? So we've done a lot of Greenfield tenant migrations, and that's really cool because, I mean, not so much on the tenant, but certainly on the AD, you can get that. What people used to do in ADs, you think Windows NT 2000, 2003, 2008, 16, blah, blah. And all that inherent kind of bad practice and luggage. And we used to have the schema domain, the root forest, and then we had these subdomains, and everyone went, oh, you crazy. But now they've got, actually keeping it simple is a much better idea. Yeah. And so going to a Greenfield AD with a much simpler AD design, and I guess we will talk to, and if you can get your computers to go intra-joined, not have the computer accounts in that target AD, then that whole AD footprint kind of gets smaller, because the things that are relying on that AD are not as much. And then going to the Greenfield tenants, kind of the same thing. It's like, well, you got this fresh start here where you can build out your conditional access policies, your app protection policies, what is your sensitivity labels, and Intune, and get it right from the start, and everyone can agree what that's going to look like. And so we get everybody across the line there. It's not for everybody. because it's a bigger migration. Of course, if you got one tenant set of data going into another tenant, then that's half the data size. But if you've got two companies going into one, then
Yes,
it's a lot more data.
You need to
And-
move all of
right.
that, right? And there's the throttling and all of that you need to worry about.
Yeah, so you make a good point about the throttling, because and it depends if you're going from a US tenant to an EU tenant and what have you, but we have the dark hours. Some of the migration tools fare better than others, but so I think it's okay for us to talk about this, because we've got a case study around about how we helped. So Standard & Poor's, SP Global, they acquired IHS Markit. And that was a huge migration for us. Ultimately, they ended up being 42,000 users in the target tenant across all of the workloads, which was mailbox data, plus all retention data, or the mailbox archives, shared mailboxes, rooms and resources. Then we had the teams, then we had the SharePoint and the groups. And when everything was bundled up, we migrated 3/4 of a petabyte of data.
Right.
From
from one tenant to the other tenant.
It was absolutely huge. And we were doing migrations, and we ended up had to raise a crit set with Microsoft. And we got on a call for this issue that we had, and actually we can talk about like some of the things you need to factor in, right? Which identity is base, right? And actually cutovers and taking domains off and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we had this issue, and we came onto the crit set call with them. We're like, yeah, we're trying to do this, and this attribute's not coming off, and we're trying to get this to work, and this isn't happening. We're converting these guest accounts and so on. And they were like, oh, is that you guys? Like, you're doing that migration? We're, yeah, set up. That happens to be the biggest migration that's going on right now at Microsoft. Like, we were wondering who was doing that. It's one of those, where do you start with your migrations and mergers? We massive advocate that you've got to start with identity. And it all starts at the identity level. And I know that that's going to be a huge passion and understanding for you. Getting, I guess in the old school terms, a consolidated GAL. People want the global address list. They want to be able to route everyone. Yes. But it's not so straightforward as an old GAL sync back in the day, right? I mean, but because all these objects, they need to be created as user accounts in the target environment. But of course, they've probably already got guest accounts over there. Yeah. So the account you've got to create over there, you've got to create an account that can be licensed but hidden from the GAL whilst you're migrating mailbox data onto it. And if any mail happens to arrive there, that it gets forwarded back to the source, and those sort of things. So there's a lot to take into account. So it's getting the identity, creating groups, distribution groups. People tend to forget about them. And if they had on-prem mailboxes and cloud-only accounts. So you have identity can be in multiple places, and at the end of the day, it's all got to be in the same place for replicability. Yeah. So that's our number one concern, is we don't really start looking at migrating data until we've got all of the directory objects created, either in the on-prem AD, if that's where they're going to be, or in the cloud, or if you're using Entry Connect to sync them up. So that's your users, your groups, your contacts, but taking into account where an object already exists and it's a guest account. And we've got a migration going on right now where we're opting, what we're going to do is they've used MTO sync to create the objects. We're going to take over the guest object, make it a full-blown member object, license that, migrate the data onto it. And one of the reasons we want to do that is we don't want them to lose their teams and groups memberships and everything they've already got in the target. And in the past, we have done that. We have deleted those guest accounts and then recreated them and put their memberships back on. But because we know they're heavily in use already via their MTO sync, that's what we're going to do for those guys.
Usually what happens in acquisition is the companies, like, they start working together in teams and all of that, right? And the migration happens usually a year, like sometime later. You don't do it like on day one, right? They've already working together, doing business and so on. So you can't just say, let's delete everything and like disrupt everything they've done, things they're working on.
No, and as you say, it's already been talked about. It's already been discussed. Everyone knows it's coming. The usual thing is they probably want to have a common having a common address, the domains is quite challenging, because obviously an SMTP domain can only be on one tenant at one time.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So that in itself can become a bit of a challenge, and maybe you have an appliance that's sitting in front of it for doing inbound and outbound routing.
Yeah, that's a very common one that always happens. Like the email, people want to have the same email, and like that's a really common issue that happens, right, with all these acquisitions. But the catch is in Entra, you can only register one domain
That's
in
right.
one tenant.
Yeah.
You cannot have it all in Entra and M365. So the domain can only belong to one tenant. It's only after you, like when you're cutting over, that you can actually remove the domain in one tenant and add it to the other tenant. So that one-to-one complicates a lot of things,
Yep.
which and includes the email flow from here to.
It really does, and you have to have those kind of big conversations up front early, and that kind of drives part of that discussion. Actually, I wanted to make sure I covered off what you were talking about. And early in the discussion about how it's going to look for the merger and the acquisition, eventually you settle on who's going to go where. And if you're not going Greenfield AD or Greenfield tenant, then the conversation is like, well, okay, well, what do you have in your existing tenant? And what is, if you go to the target tenant? So it might be a bigger one acquiring a smaller one. And that's pretty common, right? It's not, you don't often have equal measure. It's usually people growing through acquisition, and we see a lot of that. They want to make their company bigger, they grow through acquisition, and they bring someone on. And in the smaller company, their security posture may not have been as robust as the larger one. They may not have enforced conditional access to say you have to have a hybrid joined device and it has to be compliant, and you have to have, if you're going to use an Intune enrolled device, you're going to have an app protection policy on it. Well, of course, those people are now coming on to the new tenant, and that's what their day one experience is going to be like. So auditing the current target tenant and talking to the migrating users and saying, this is what you're currently enjoying today, but on the 1st of September, you're going to be enjoying this. And these are what you're going to need to do on day one. Register for MFA. It's the first thing you're going to do. So it's quite often that whole user experience. So the business analysts are kind of brought in, the comms people, lots of good comms. It's as terrible as to say, we know people don't read the comms. You've got to send them multiple times. It's got to be a portal where they can go to, and still on day one, they're going to contact the help desk and say, oh, my mail's not working and my phone's not working. And I'm like, we sent you 5 emails about it.
What is MFA? There you go.
What's this MFA thing? So that's a huge part to play. We talk about having a migration coordinator, so scoping people who's in and out of scope. And the longer, and actually you said a year, if we did a tenant migration that took a year, Merrill, we would not be happy.
No, what I meant is the migration start maybe a year after the acquisition. So the business is already working together, and they are like giving access to people, they are collaborating, they are in teams as guests. And then now you come in and you decide to do the migration like a year later after the acquisition. But people are already working, and you can't just tell them, we are just going to delete all the guests, and you need to add the people into the right places and give them the permissions again. And those, that won't work.
And we've run into people with contacts and groups. But guests get used pretty extensively. And of course, then you get into different types of guests, right? Then you have B2B direct connect with shared channels. Microsoft have done this wonderful job of having cross-tenant identity access settings with that throws a few spanners in the works as well, trying to get those.
Unwind those.
Yeah, and then the guest account and the user account being in the same place. It does have a part to play, quite a big part.
Yeah.
But there also is if a migration takes too long, you've got the joiners and leavers problem as well. So you start scoping people up, but of course, if the migration takes too long, you don't want people in that long coexistence period. And in our opinion, it's better to do that migration as quick as you can. And we always advocate cutover migrations. There would have to be a very, very strong political, mainly, unusual technical reason for us to do staggered waved migration. So we have done the biggest migration we ever did, Cutover. We did 9,500 users in a weekend.
Right.
I didn't love it. It was a long weekend of no sleep. Doing cutovers is hard, man. It's
Yes.
and I don't know how often you've actually had to do this. Getting the domain off of Entra, in theory, sounds easy.
At the time, yeah.
And it's not. Let me tell you, it's
that's a good example. Like people might not have experienced that. So tell us some stories about what happened.
Oh wow, we have been burned really hard. It is the single hardest thing we do into tenant-to-tenant migration. So you prepare all your migration tools, you get the mailboxes migrating, you've got the OneDrive, the Teams, the SharePoint, it's all going well. You've got your directory syncing, it's all going great. And you plan your cutover weekend, right? We're going to start at 8 p.m. Friday night. First thing we're going to do is going to get the domain off the tenant. And so we rip through, and you've got to get the domain value off everything. It's got to come off of users, groups, contacts, security groups, email-enabled security groups, Office 365 groups, Teams, everything, right? And it's got to come out of the UPN, the primary SMTP addresses, the proxy addresses.
Right. So you had to go updating all the objects.
Wow, it's and it's not just so you've got the SIP address as well. So now, and where is this object mastered, right? So if you so we have scripts to do this. We have scripts if we're doing it in the cloud. We have scripts if we're doing it in AD. But if you're talking an organization that's got 10,000 users and 20,000 groups and 5,000 teams, it takes a long time to run a script that's going to just strip out every proxy address and SMTP address. So, we have our tools and our tricks and our ways and the things we have learned. So you get through and you get off, 99.5% of all of the objects gone from the UPN, the proxy address, email address, service principal accounts, it's gone. Then you still can't get the domain off. And you're like, what's going on? Which object is this on? And eventually...
And you don't get much of a clue, right? Telling you what...
No. Well, you can go into the tenant and it will tell you, but then, of course, then you're into the nitty-gritty, into the scripts. It's like, okay, get a Azure AD user where like equals, and then you suddenly find that... now, this is a real-life story of what we ran into.
Right.
You have objects that are on retention. And you've got to get all the domain values out of the proxy addresses. But of course, in Entra or on Azure, whichever, take your pick, the proxy address attribute is not something you can manipulate in PowerShell directly. You can't. It will sync from on-prem, and if it is licensed, you can manipulate the proxy addresses through Exchange Online. If it is not licensed and not synced from on-prem, or even if it is syncing from on-prem, and that object has a proxy address in it, even if it's a SIP address for your domain, you can't take the domain off, and you can't update that proxy address.
Right.
So, fast forward, we got this done. We got it. You figure out the ways, and for if it's just a couple, you end up just giving them a license, and then you license the object. It lights up in Exchange Online. You rip through, you rip out the mail, the proxy addresses, you change the name, job done. I've had clients where they have no licenses left. I'm like, okay, so
you
can't buy,
and you can't buy, like, especially with an enterprise agreement, so you can't just get
so you end up taking a license off of someone else's account, licensing the other one, and then putting it back on. And honestly, it just gets so tragic. It gets really difficult, and it can be groups as well. And if they're syncing from on-prem, and so you look at the AD object on premises, and you go, UPN's fine, SMTP address is fine, proxy addresses look fine. Why isn't it syncing it off? And then you keep looking at it, and you do a whole sync, and then you do a delta sync, and then you do an initial sync for Entra Connect. You're like, the only thing I think, okay, I'm going to take it out of scope. I'm going to take it out of AD Connect scope, and I take it out of scope, and then I hope that it's going to take it out of the tenant, and then I bring it back into scope, and I hope it's going to bring it back without the proxy address. You know what? 99 times out of 100, that's happened, but we've had times where it hasn't happened. They're just war stories, Merrill. I mean, that's the biggest thing. But then we get past that, and we get it over. I mean, I suppose actually the last final one point I'll talk on that particular war story. We did have a client. Actually, this was the 9,000 user one, and the one remaining object we could not get the we couldn't get the address off of it. We had no access to the object, and it was because they were pre-BPOS. They were Microsoft Online
Oh, wow.
services.
That's the old.
Yep. And it was the postmaster account for the very first Exchange Online account, and nobody could do it. We couldn't even do anything with the object. We couldn't even license it and take it off. It was like this hidden. We ended up having to get a crit-sit ticket raised with Microsoft to get the Exchange Online engineers out of bed to get them to do it. It was brutal. That held us up a lot. There you go.
Wow.
So that's an experience. Divestitures.
And it can be something like that, right? Like even though you plan everything, you think you know everything that can happen, and then you end up with the BPOS account.
Yeah. Honestly, it really bit us quite hard, and so we, in advance now, when we're doing this, we run a lot of audits and backups and tests, and we look at all the objects, and we've got this what if report and say, okay, this is every object in the tenant that has this on it. If we do this, have we accounted for it? So it's a big deal. But then fast forward, so Cutover weekends is a great place to carry on, right? So, you have, and this is equally the same for people that are going to their cloud first journey as well. So you do all this wonderful work in the background with the client. And there's a lot of burden on the customer IT teams as well. So we always try to work collaboratively as a partnership, an extension of their team. They've got their BAU job to do as well as this migration, and they really want to see this migration in the rearview mirror. They want done with it.
Yeah.
So, they come on, this is what we do. We work together. But the day one experience, so you've done all this great work, you've migrated all the data, you cut over the tenant, you've had no sleep, and then the end users come online Monday morning, 7 a.m., first person's online. What is their user experience like? So they've come from an old tenant, like we were talking about, where they have a laptop, a workstation, a computer, a phone that's logged in, and now Monday morning, they're on company B. So they were company A Friday, company B Monday, and it's about what does that look like for them now? Can they get logged in? What account are they logging on with? What does their Outlook and their Teams and their OneDrive that used to be connected to the legacy tenant is now got to start up and fire up and log them into the new tenant? I guess an example of that, of something to look out for as well, is that if you have devices that need to go hybrid joined and become compliant, but that device can't become compliant until it's Intune enrolled. It can't become Intune enrolled until it is, if it's got GPO for hybrid, and then and of course they have a conditional access policy that says you can't access anything until your device becomes compliant. So now you've got users sitting there at 9 o'clock in the morning, can't access their Outlook, can't access their mail, can't access their Teams, and they don't know anything about why their device. They raise help desk says, "Oh yeah, your machine hasn't become hybrid joined and it's not compliant in Intune," and the end user's like, "What?" And we're like, "Well, can you just ping the domain controller and see that you can reach it?" And it's like, what does ping mean? Can you bring a command prompt? Genuinely, that's the sort of things you get. So I always say, either at the start of any project we work on with the client, and even to my own engineers, it's like, ultimately, the success of the project will be judged by the end user experience in the first 4 hours on the Monday morning. And those end users have no idea of the weekend you've just done and the 3, 4, 5 months leading into this cutover, thinking about SharePoint and versions and Power BI and Power Platform and all of the things and private channels and shared channels, and they don't care. They just don't care. Like, my day job is to make X amount of money for this business. I need to get my widgets out the door. I really don't care what you do on IT. Why is my machine logging in? And so the more successful the day one user experience is the way the whole project will be judged. The internal IT team, the people that ran the project, the stakeholders and the leaders. So we're really big on, I was saying earlier about that day one user experience and about the comms, and that their machine will convert from legacy tenant to source tenant, from on-prem AD joined to cloud native device as seamlessly as possible, because the quicker they are back up and running, the quicker their feedback love for the project is going to be, and the greater it's going to be, and the more the project will be seen as a success. So we have over time documented how that process should look. We work with the client, and we use software that will transition a device from its legacy state or previous state to becoming joined to its future state as seamlessly as possible. In my mind, if the user is not back up and fully running within an hour, that's a huge cost to the business. You can talk about your software licensing, and you can talk about paying your IT consultants, but the downtime
for the business,
and it's not just, it's your VIPs, but your middle and your EAs and the PAs and people who are just doing their general day job. When you add up all of their hours, if they're not up and running within an hour, let's say they're offline for 4 hours from 9 till 12 until they go to I've had enough, I'm going to lunch, right? And then between time, they've raised the help desk ticket. So now you've got the help desk people involved, and then they can't get it solved. It goes to the second line engineer. Then they have to have a desktop visit. So now if you have 3 people for one problem, and the person themselves still not productive for 3 or 4 hours, and then you spread that across an estate of thousands of users, it's a huge cost.
Absolutely, yes.
And that is the part we really early on try to solve and identify and make sure that that doesn't happen. And so, using the right tools, making a good choice, understanding what it is you're trying to deliver, what does the end user experience look like on day one? And we call it the T-minus countdown. T-0 is boom. And T+1, day one, how does it look for them?
And how do you, how does it work on the mobiles, right? Like mobiles, it's not that easy, right? They'll need to sort of unenroll and re-enroll if it's like personal devices, especially.
It is, ironically, it is the easiest, but the hardest, if you know what I mean. So there is no magic bullet. So with the Windows workstations, Windows 10 and 11 devices, the software that can domain disjoin, domain rejoin,
you can script and you can do stuff.
You can get it done. We use software. These guys, PowerSync Pro. We have software that will reconfigure the device, repermission the Windows profile, get the applications up and running, box fresh start, job done. They start in, log in, put the UPN in, Outlook starts up, OneDrive starts up, Teams starts up, away they go. On a phone or an iPhone, iPad, Android device, there is nothing like that. You can't do that. So it needs to be basically, the simplest way to explain it to them is, so unfortunate as it sounds, is go and find all those apps on your phone, Outlook, Teams, OneDrive, push and hold, delete app, go find your Intune registration, uninstall this device, restart your device, off to the App Store, re-download Outlook, Teams, OneDrive, bang, and then re-log in again. That is literally the magic bullet. Ironically, or I don't know if it's ironically, I think end users are kind of more comfortable and familiar with deleting and installing apps, right? Because who hasn't had an app on their iPhone where it's like, it's just not working properly, I'm just going to delete and reinstall it. So they're kind of used to that play. So that kind of, we would like to have we're sort of working on a story where we can take them through. I know they come to a portal and it'll step them through those steps they need to take. But yeah, that's it. That said, I did run into one on my last migration where no matter what I did for this, they still had an issue. They could logged into Outlook, but they couldn't get logged into Teams. Then I had 2 issues for this customer. One, they were using Okta for their IDP, right? So they were Okta authenticating, and it was Okta that was holding the password. And then that would pass the signal down to Entra, and they're saying, you're authenticated, welcome to 365, here's your mail, right?
Yeah.
But for some users, this wasn't working. And it turned out it was case sensitive. So, so Okta had their username as, I'm Conrad Murray. It had capital C dot capital M, but in their Entra, it had been lowercased, right? So that was one little quirky thing we got around. And then the other thing is, so it would work for Outlook and it would work for OneDrive, but it wasn't working for Teams. Or was it? Yeah, it was just Teams. Anyway, fast forward, it turned out basically you need to go to Edge, and in Edge there is a hidden URL string you can go to. And bear in mind, I'd had them sign out all their apps, delete their apps, unintuned from Enroll, and Edge was still holding on to cached creds for
Right,
the
the
source tenant.
profile.
Every time they tried to start up Teams on their device, and of course, as part of our migration process, we actually we only allow browser access back for troubleshooting. We'd kind of like to block their accounts, but then that doesn't give them the ability to go and check stuff. So they get to OA, they get to Teams through the browser, but we don't allow desktop and mobile access. So of course they were trying on their phones to get into Teams, and it was taking them back to the source tenant, and they're like, you can't come from here this way. This is not
Yes.
going to work for you. Anyway, it turned out there was this little Edge cached user creds. Figured that out.
Right, that
They
you
were
had to
in.
clear.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, always something.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that's when it comes to merging tenants, right? Like bringing folks in. Is there anything we need to cover in merging before we move to sort of divestitures?
No, from the merging point of view, is there's a lot. Typically, it depends kind of how ruthless the acquiring company are. But if they have, like saying, if you have a balanced partnership of equal standing, there's so much to consider. Even things like email signatures. So company A might be using, I don't know, a native mail platform signature. Company B might be using a third-party signature, but they need that deployed. And it can be things like that. Transport rules, data leakage prevention, retention policies, retention data, Azure information protection. So they've configured AIP and sensitivity labels in the source tenant, and then you need to migrate the AIP key, and then so we migrate the encrypted data. The AIP key works in the target. Enterprise apps, app registrations. Wow, I mean, there is. It's recreate.
Yes.
There's not a
Yeah.
migration path for that.
Yeah.
What does the conditional access policies and app protection policies look in the source, and who's recreating them in the target? Having a common, it is quite handy to get the internal teams to agree on what they think the security posture should look like. Level 1, level 2, level 3. Microsoft's got some great guidance on this, and agree on that in advance and deploy it into both tenants. Kind of, if you can, deploy it into both tenants in advance so that people are warmed up to
So
what
it's
that
the same experience,
exactly.
right? Like they're used to the MFA.
Exactly. Yeah. So I haven't had a non-MFA client for a long time, but we use that as an example, right? Imagine the source are not using MFA. So you warm them up, get them MFA, so when they come to the target, they know all about it. Yeah. So that's definitely for the acquisition merger space. Yeah.
You had some thoughts on MTO, multi-tenant dogs. It's there are a lot of paper cuts when you're not in one tenant, when you're collaborating across tenants. There's lots and lots of paper cuts. The multi-tenant org tries to address some of them to sort of make it better. And Teams itself has come a long way because that was one where it would like show different names. Like when you type someone's name, it would show both the guest and the external identity and confuse people, and people who lose messages that were sent to them because it went to the guest and not the external and things like that. So there were some of those. So what are things you've seen?
If you are two organizations and you are likely to live in long-term coexistence, then you can explore and entertain this. But a lot of those features are not, I don't want to say they're not especially well thought out. They don't work in isolation. So you need the cross-tenant identity access set up, go with the MTO sync. And then you have to have consideration around what your teams would look like with shared channels. Because if you set up your cross-tenant access settings and you allow B2B sort of direct connect, then as you're saying, you actually don't need a guest account
In
the other tenant. So you can just add them and they'll have access and you can communicate with them. But that very rarely happens. And usually there's already a guest account there. And it's the exact thing. Now you've got a guest account to represent a user that you want to communicate with, and they've got this direct connect access.
Yeah.
And then someone comes along and goes, you know what we need? We need MTO sync here. And then of course MTO sync comes along and starts trying to create users in the other tenant. And you can have them as user type member, object type user, but there's already a guest account over there. And I think from memory, MTO sync will attempt to take them over, I think. But it does have limitations around groups, so it's not going to sync groups. It's also, from my experience, it doesn't seem to look like it updates attributes, all of the attributes all of the time. Then you have deletions. So if you've got moves, changes, additions, and deletions, if you don't think to have your MTO sync set up correctly to deal with that. So I don't know if I want to sort of express my personal opinion. I'm not convinced it's a long-term solution for enterprise customers, for sure. I think it's also, you need to have a really strong understanding of how those things I was talked about, Teams, cross-tenant access, and MTO sync work, and you need to have both organizations having a good understanding of it, and people that are willing to play well together to understand what they do affects each other. Because if you're not aligned and you don't have a good relationship between those two people that are trying to do that, then it can come unstuck a bit.
Right. Yeah, the way it evolved, MTO is you're anyway doing B2B, like people are just naturally collaborating B2B. So MTO just takes that and makes it easier. So it sort of adds in more of the capability to bring across more attributes, and users and removes the need for users to go through the whole guest invite flow.
Yes, there's definitely that. I mean, first time I came across that, it caught me out. I was like, I just added this person to, why are they not getting an invite? And then they were just able to access it straight away.
Yeah.
But then they've still got the drop down thing in Teams. Fortunately, that is a lot better. That was pretty painful for a while there, wasn't it? Changing orgs in Teams.
Yeah.
But
the Teams clients have got better.
Yeah, I think, and my colleagues and I, we talk about this all the time, Microsoft have an incredibly challenging job to get all of the stuff to hang together. And in the main, they kind of get there, but it does feel a little bit, and mainly from a selfish point of view, working a lot in the space in which we work in, I don't think they quite take into account, I think they think about this will be the end state and the final state. But if that's not going to be the end state and the final state, how do people get themselves out of this situation now?
Right.
And it's a bit like with the shared channels, seemed like a good idea, but ultimately, having control over that data and the retention and being able to stop someone, that was a bit an interesting deployment.
Shared channels, like I don't think many of our customers use it, but it's not something like you wouldn't need to use it anymore because we now have better features. And shared channels, it breaks in Teams. There's this feature called shared channels, and this option called B2B Direct Connect only exists just for that feature in Teams.
But if you put it in, you want to roll it back, you're kind of in a bit of world of pain, and it's quite hard to unpick that. And
I think for people listening, it's like don't use Direct Connect.
Totally. I'm so glad you said that, Meryl, because like Tuan and I have spoken about it a lot. It's like, if you could put that genie back in the bottle. Don't. Don't.
Like MTO, like B2B direct, like the standard B2B collaboration flow is much better.
I totally agree. And it just because of what we're talking about, the mergers and acquisitions, a while back, well, I don't know if I want to say year and a half, but no, it must be longer actually. The ability to convert a guest account to a full-blown member has been very good for us. It didn't come without its drawbacks in the beginning, and now there's a graph command for removing So it's the identity provider. So when you're an MTO sync, the identity provider that authenticates back to the home tenant. But now that I've migrated them and I'm going to decom the home tenant, I don't want them to authenticate back to the home tenant. I need them to authenticate to the new tenant.
The new tenant.
But where their MTO account got synced into. And so you've got to get that off and then give it a password and then let it become the home mastered account. We also noted it has no immutable ID on it when it comes across, kind of by design. The immutable ID should only be in one tenant, but we know it can be
it's
across.
immutable. Yeah.
So we tend to make the immutable ID the same on both, and then when we cross sync them and bring them back up, we know which one we've got. So that's worked well. But I did run into an issue converting guest accounts to member accounts back in the past where it would just get stuck in a MFA loop, and there was nothing I could do to get out of it. And in the end, I had to literally go through every account that I converted, and I had to then just reset their MFA and say, you need to re-provision your MFA again. That kind of resolved it, but I was hoping it was going to stick with what their MFA was. Actually, and the other thing is if you use the Authenticator app on your phone, one little thing is that the account that you're authenticating with is kind of tattooed on. So if you keep the same account, their Authenticator app doesn't catch up and update the UPN. They still has their old UPN value on there. Yeah, kind of be nice if that changed, but
it still works, but
still works.
It shows the old UPN.
Yeah, it's still got the hash EXT hash in it. And you're like, oh, it'd be nice if they just that updated, you know?
Yeah, it's the same with the security keys as well. Like I have where the key still has the old UPN, it'll show that, but it still works with the.
Do you use
UPN.
These YubiKeys and things like that?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's made, but for guys like us, we're quite commonly across multiple tenants. So big fan of Windows Hello for Business, big fan of the YubiKeys. I mean, there's been I've spoken a lot about, I think, the amazing work that has been done with Entra, the security guys, and the other organizations coming together with Microsoft. Might have been even your podcast to listen to, but the looking at it holistically and saying, it's all well and good to say to end users, don't click on that link. That's a bad link. That's a phishing link, but it only takes one bad apple, right? And ultimately, you know, if you get a pop-up for an MFA and then the token takeover and all this sort of thing, but having phishing-resistant MFA with passkeys and passwordless authentication, it's still not super beautiful user experience to set up for the user. Like it's like 13 different clicks and screens to set up my YubiKey.
Yes, true.
But at the end of the day, if you can sell it to the user that, you know, this is literally the gold standard for security. If you could have this on your banking app, you would have this all day. If you're going to access corporate data, then let me tell you, you're going to have phishing-resistant MFA to protect our data. And that's quite an interesting conversation. Like, oh, I just want to have an SMS. Well, SMS has kind of proven to be a little bit, get around that a bit. You should use the Authenticator app, and better still, use passwordless or passkeys. And better still, why don't you use Windows Hello for Business or a YubiKey?
Yeah, it's more seamless with the Hello for Business.
Oh, brilliant.
I guess new passkeys.
It's still, well, actually, that kind of, I know you were going to ask about divestitures, but talking about going to cloud only. So I've heard multiple people struggle, and it's still interesting to me, and I don't know how Microsoft can make this journey, this conversation, this messaging better. One of the blockers I've heard from customers to going to cloud native or to going to Windows Hello for Business is they can't get access back to on-prem applications, file and print servers, and they find that Windows Hello for Business gets in the way for them. I'm like, so getting their Entra Connect set up to do cloud Kerberos tokens and things like that, it just seems like a bit of a leap for them, unfortunately. And quite often we'll come on and just help them get across that last bit of the line.
Yes.
And the big driver there is like, well, you really need Windows Hello for Business in here. Like, this is MFA fatigue, right? We hear that a lot. conditional access that enforces MFA everywhere all the time unless CAE is kicked in. So the continual access evaluation will say, listen, if your CAE kicks in and they're using Windows Hello for Business on the same device, from the same, they're not going to get MFA fatigue. Oh, we don't use Windows Hello for Business. Like, why wouldn't you use Windows Hello for Business? Well, we tried to put it in and we had struggles and people couldn't get there and then they couldn't get back to on. Come on.
It could have been before Cloud Kerberos Trust. Like it
Must
used to
have
be a
been.
nightmare before.
Yeah.
And now it's a lot simpler. And yeah, the story I hear all the time is like one customer I helped with Hello for Business. They did that. And then the day came where they have to reset their password. So they reset the password because the policy was still there, like to reset every 90 days. And they were like, I didn't see any prompts on my laptop. Like it just continued working because they're used to seeing like 100 prompts on the day they reset their password. But Hello for Business, because it's passwordless, it doesn't need, the token doesn't get invalidated just because of that for that user. And they're authenticating each time anyway. Like they're doing a whole 3-factor, but they just don't realize it.
No, that's right.
They're doing a fresh auth. 3-factor auth, and it all just seamless for them. So
yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that. And then and that sort of that conversation and that journey around going to cloud native for devices, so going all the way back to what we talked about earlier about Greenfield ADs, and if you're not having the computer accounts coming authenticating, being cloud native for the devices, right? And you're directly logging in with your Entra account, being authenticated against Entra, the device is authenticated, it's Entra joined, Entra enrolled, everything's happening there. Just makes their life a whole lot easier. Yes, I know they need to get back to some on-prem applications. Yes, there's some file and print servers. Yes, there's some legacy applications. But, a lot of that stuff is just, it's kind of going away now, isn't it? Actually, I was listening to one of yours about, was it global secure access and, proxies and application gateways, and there's just all these things that can just take over
make
from
that easier.
Like that constant connection. I'm sure it was. You did a one on global secure access? I'm sure it wasn't.
No, not yet. I haven't done one. We need to.
Did you come on? Was it Nick's?
Or maybe when I went on a podcast.
Yes,
could be when I went on the PackSet, the interest rate stuff we spoke about.
Very interesting stuff in that area.
Yes, yeah. I need to do one on the IntraChat podcast.
I think you should actually. Yeah.
So the last part is like the journey, the life cycle, right? You acquire companies, but then you sell or you separate and you sell off a company. And that's more clear cut. Like people, there's less arguments about which tenant.
Yeah.
You're going into a new tenant. Like that part of the story is a lot easier.
It's definitely quite interesting. It's a different dynamic, definitely talking with the customer when there's a divestiture in play. And we've done a few. And what's kind of inevitable and unexpected, the divesting company, right? We've got our thing going on here. You're going away.
Yeah.
See you later. It's like they're not that unhelpful, but they're also not that invested either. And it can be this kind of two different divestors, right? There's either divesting off to just be their own thing, and so they're quite good, those ones, because they go into a greenfield tenant, they want to go cloud only, they want all the whiz bang stuff. Maybe it's a management buyout, whatever. So we've done those ones, and then there's the part that's being divested that's being bought by another organization. So you've kind of got not quite three of them, but there's like the one that's selling the bit that's being sold, and the bit that's doing the acquiring. So there's an acquisition here. And we've actually been stuck man in the middle, where we've been helping the divesting company, but not helping the acquiring company. And we've had to go to migrate into a middle holding pen for then the acquiring company to use their IT guys to do another migration. Very interesting. A bit complicated.
Very interesting and complicated.
Yeah, because you've got two IT service partners doing two migrations. One's migrating data out, one's migrating data in, and we weren't allowed, or they didn't want us to do it into the acquiring company. They had their own guys.
Right.
Fair enough. That's up to them. But the thing interesting about divestitures, everyone kind of thinks like, okay, we're a company of, I don't know, 5,000 users, and we're going to divest these 500 people of the widgets division. And we know who those 500 people are. See you later. 1st of October, you're going to go and become widgets.com, and we're going to live happily ever after. Well, that's great for their mailboxes, and it's great for their mailbox archives, and it's great for their OneDrives. What's not so quite cut and dried is the teams and groups, because now you've got, of those 500 people, they collaborated and worked with other people in the business.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, who owns this team? It's like, this team has got half the team that are divesting and half the team that are staying.
Right.
So then you have this kind of bun fight. Well, it's our team. No, it's our team. Well, we're going to migrate it because it's got all our data in it. It's like, you're not. So that became quite an interesting conversation. And then the same with distribution groups. It's like, well, we want to have replyability to all of these people that are in these distribution groups. And same with security groups. So and half the group is made up of divesting people and half of them are non-divesting people.
Right.
So whose group is that? Like, so you end up sort of just doubling up. You recreate the groups.
You
just
create
don't
the same thing.
You have the
on both
non-divesting people are not in there, and the divesting people get taken out over here. But of course, then as the divesting people are not taking the domain name with them either. So
Right.
They don't want all their mail to just die on the vine on the cutover weekend, right? It's like, because I know, John Smith at
Yes, they are network
abc.com.
of- Yeah,
I don't know his
correct.
new email
The
address.
external partners.
Right.
Right.
And
yes.
so you've got to kind of convince the people that are doing the divesting to keep their accounts hanging around for a bit as mail-enabled users with target addresses on them, and have the
Right.
mail forwarding.
So they get the emails.
Yeah. Or they put the forwarding on at the appliance level, or a transport rule that says if they're in this group, it's going to migrate them over here. And the other one is the shared mailboxes. It's the same thing, right? It's like, half the people are using the shared mailbox and half the people aren't using the shared mailbox, and who owns the shared mailbox. So that's the kind of challenges we typically run into with divestitures.
There's less problems with identity with divestitures, right? Like you're just creating a new tenant, and maybe see if it's a AD as well, you sync those users.
Sync the users in. Domain, quite often the domain's not coming over as part of a divestiture.
Right,
They're always the easiest migrations when you're not taking the domain. So no domain cut over. The UPN they're getting on day one is the UPN they're going to keep forever. It's going to be their email address. So you don't need to, it's not like you're giving them the malware on Microsoft and then having to change them at the end. You create them once, they've got the right details on them, done. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't mind those. It's just getting the political source environment to understand what's going on, what's staying.
I think with both acquisitions and divestitures, like that's the biggest thing that takes a lot of time, right? Like a lot of the parties agreeing on what they should be doing.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing about acquisitions and migrations. We do see a lot. The company that's being acquired, and I tell you what, it's still interesting, and you probably remember from the admin days, a lot of dirty data, a lot of configuration drift, but also genuinely, you might say to an organization, so how many users have you got? About 1,000.
Yeah.
Can you be more specific? Not really. Like, what do you mean not really? Like, well, we think it's about 1,000. Okay. But then you put that at scale and like you end up with like 18,000, and it'll be like, yeah, we think we're around the 18,000 mark, but it could be 17 or it could be 19. And of course to us, like that's quite a big difference, right? And then you take that into the teams and the SharePoints and the OneDrive and the share mailboxes, and then they say, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to clean up all the data in the source, and we'll tell you what we're going to migrate. And I'm like, my heart sinks. And I'm like, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? It's never going to happen. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we'll give these guys a couple of months to see if they can do this. They can't. You just can't. And my advice is, don't even try. You just migrate everything, and then consider cleaning it up in the target. And I know that sounds really counterintuitive and counterproductive. The problem is, if you take a team and it's got owners and members on it, and it hasn't been used for a year, let's say, and you mail every owner and member of that team and go, do you need this team migrated?
No one wants to say no, right?
Not a
Because
single person is going to own up and saying, no, we don't need that. But every one of them is going to reply back and say, better keep it just in case.
Yeah, which is why you need to have good sort of clean up rules. Like to avoid these problems, the good thing for admins is to set up the native entra, like the group expiry and all those features in. So it sort of self cleans. And then you have retention policies so that you have regulatory requirements, right? You might need to keep them for 7 years and you do all of that, but you keep cleaning all and like removing the dormant.
Yeah.
groups
The
and
e-discovery
keeping
through
healthy.
through great retention policies is your champion here. But the teams drift and bloat can get
Yes.
pretty out of control. And you're right, without having so you have those access reviews as well. They're pretty cool.
Yes.
And you can do those access reviews for guest accounts and for the teams. And there's a couple of settings around ownerless groups as well, because that's pretty common. You end up with an ownerless group because nobody's used the group in a year. And actually, a couple of customers we're working with, actually one of the things we're starting to see over time, Meryl. So we've been doing these migrations a long time. And, 5-6 years ago, a large mailbox was 20 gig. Now, it's not uncommon for a lot of mailboxes to be 50 gig. We run into mailboxes that are 90 gig and have a 100 gig archive. And the problem for that is when you migrate that, it blows up. And we know you can have an unlimited archive, but it still takes 30 days for it to spin up the second part of the mailbox archive, right? So they can take a long time. But it's the same also like with OneDrive. Having a 1 terabyte OneDrive 6 years ago, that was large. It's not uncommon for people to be getting into the 2, 3, 4, 5 terabyte. And then you get your SharePoint and your Teams. These, over time, they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it takes longer and longer to migrate. And then you've got versions as well and version history. But on top of that, what we're starting to see now is that customers are starting to exceed their actual overall tenant data allowance. So, got a couple of clients having to really keep on top of their allowances. So then versions have a part to play, like the total data size, how many teams people have created, how big their OneDrives are getting. All of that has a part to play. So having kind of good governance around, what we see a lot now is people just don't even allow that end users to create groups and teams off their own anymore. They were just seeing the sprawl and the growth of teams was just getting out of control. So now that's just locked down. If you want to create a team, you have to go through a process to create a team. Yeah.
Yeah, that's in the large enterprises, they've lived through that. And I think like where I worked, we actually had a whole training. A person had to finish a training before they could create a group, like even ask for a group.
Wow, really?
There's a course they had to follow to say.
I can't say I'm not a fan, Meryl. It sounds like a pretty good training scheme to me.
Yeah, we set up that whole process. Only after that they get added to this group where they can create groups. So because they need to know how to govern the group and what their responsibilities are as the group owner. So yeah, that was what you tried doing, but it's hard to know whether people really watch the course.
Well, and then of course you get into the other problem, don't you? Like, if you make things hard for people, they're disingenuous. They find another way around it.
Yeah,
right?
They use WhatsApp.
Yeah. Shadow IT. It's the curse of IT, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to make everything very easy in Microsoft 365. I'm going to create teams. I'm going to allow external access. I'm going to allow guest accounts. I'm going to allow sensitivity labels. I'm going to allow OneDrive sharing. I'm going to allow, so I can control that data exfiltration and proliferation, right? And so we do this, but then as soon as you shut that down, next thing you know, people are starting up Dropbox and Box and Slack. And now the data is leaving your environment and you've got no control over it because it's in a different place because they couldn't share document ABC with me. Don't worry, I've just emailed it to you.
Yeah.
Well, like, well, now, unless you've put Azure Information Protection on that document, that corporate document's now left your environment and you've got no control over it. So you can't make things too hard for people. Otherwise, they'll just find a way
that's
around
true.
it.
Yeah, that's always balanced with security and
Yeah.
and all of this. Cool. Awesome. Thanks so much, Conrad. It's been a fascinating conversation. And you have some products that really help with some of these capabilities, right? With PowerSync Pro.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we've been doing it a long time. For certain things, we found there was just nothing out in the market that could do it the way we needed it doing. There were tools that would convert Outlook profiles, but that's such a small part of the story for a day one activity for an end user, right? And for directory synchronization, this is a Microsoft podcast, but we have
But you
seen a
also do
lot.
Google and
Exactly.
all of that, right?
Yeah. So we're seeing a lot of migrations from Google to Microsoft, right? And there isn't a directory sync tool out there. So in there, ultimately, we wrote our own directory synchronization software, which will do Google to AD, Google to Entra. We'll do AD to AD, AD to Entra, and even Entra to Entra. We were doing that before MTO sync came along.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh, this MTO sync story, what's going on here? It's like, so
I think a lot of people did. Like I wrote my own script
Right.
to sync from one tenant
You've
to
got
the
to
other.
have a way to do it, but ours is fully automated. And the good thing about that, so scripts is one thing. And I wrote an article about the scripts versus automation. So when you've got joiners and leavers and group memberships changing and renames, married names, you need to kind of track all that. So having a directory synchronization tool that through the whole duration of what you're doing was critical to us. Being able to rewrite the attributes, the target address, hide from the gal, unhide from the gal, that kind of thing. And then in particular, when we do migrations, we've used all the major vendors, and I won't name them because they know who they are. We like some better than others, but we've pretty much used them all. But there was none out there that really did a super fantastic job of migrating Windows workstations. So taking a Windows 10 or 11 device and forget your mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. We can just take a device and make it cloud only. Forget about your fresh starting, re-imaging devices, doing hardware swap outs. You can just install a bit of software. 15 minutes later, it's converted it from AD joined, hybrid joined, made an Entra joined device. Now they're cloud only. Carry on as you were. And in the tenant-to-tenant migration space, like we talked about, ultimately the project success judged on day one. Can they start at their machine? Can they start up Outlook, Teams, and OneDrive? Are they back up and running? Yes. We wrote some software. Handle your things like your BitLocker and your AIP and whether it's on, whether it's off, domain joined, non-domain joined, hybrid joined, Intune enrolled, and all of that part that all happens in the background that's so important to the user. The things we can't automate on an iPhone, but we can automate it on a Windows device, and that's what we do. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, Conrad, for coming on and sharing all of your wisdom and all the stories. It's been very fascinating to hear all of that.
Yeah, we've got some more stories. We've got a few more coming. I've got my calendar on the wall, and I was looking at August, September, October, and I'm thinking, we've got this one coming up. It's like
long weekends.
A few long weekends in my in my horizon. That's for sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
Meryl, thank you so much for your time. It's actually a real honor to be on a call with you, and I'd love what you're doing out there. And I spoke before we started about your Meister tool, and I really want to get really big into that, tracking configuration changes in the tenant, and that sort of thing. I think it's amazing. That's how I first came across what you were doing. So I'm really glad I've got to spend some face time with you.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, Meister is growing. Like the usage is exploding. I think based on the metrics, right now we have like 68,000 tenants that have used Meister so far.
68,000 tenants.
Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy.
All right. I'll try and get you up to 70.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's more the community joining in and helping, and like we're adding a lot of different types of tests and so on. So it's been good.
Amazing.
Cool. But this episode was very different from our usual ones where we just talk about features. It's good to talk about, things that our IT admins and folks working in orgs that are facing these go through. So
Yeah.
thanks so much for coming and sharing all your
No
words
problem.
of
Life at the
wisdom.
coalface, man. This is
Yes.
yeah. All right.